Darnell Cole only wants a peaceful home for his little daughter, Aaliyah, at the Newark port. But at 10:47 a.m., he is forced to marry Clarissa Thorne, a proud Manhattan CEO. High society looks down on him as a stain and a poor black gold digger. In reality, Darnell secretly carries her $4,217.83 debt and millions of dollars more to save her family business. This marriage tests their trust and fights class prejudice between two very different worlds. But now they face Trenton Pierce's hate, cruel kidnap plots, and a dangerous fire at the port. Will Clarissa drop her pride when she learns her husband's true identity in a moment of life and death? Because that clock kept ticking, neither of them could stop what came next. The Newark docks smelled like diesel, salt water, and burnt coffee. Darnell Cole knelt beside a rusted generator, his knuckles scraped raw. He was 37 years old, and his hands never stopped moving. Metal groaned under his wrench. Seagulls screamed overhead. Somewhere behind him, a forklift beeped in short, tired bursts. Rust flakes drifted down onto his sleeve like dry snow. The generator's casing still held the day's heat, warm against his palm. Salt air stung the small cut on his thumb. He wiped sweat from his brow with his sleeve. His daughter, Aaliyah, was 9 years old. She was waiting for him at home in an apartment that cost $851 a month. He had promised her pancakes tonight. He always kept his promises to her. Other dock workers waved as they passed, calling him Cole like he was just another name on a timesheet. He waved back, tired but steady. None of them knew what he carried in his chest besides fatigue. At 2:15 in the morning, long after Aaliyah fell asleep, Darnell opened a locked case under his bed. The hinges clicked softly, careful not to wake her down the hall. Inside sat a satellite phone, encrypted and cold to the touch. A single green light blinked, waiting. Few people knew what Darnell truly controlled behind that phone. Fewer still would believe it. He read 3 encrypted messages, jaw tight, then closed the case again. Somewhere across the ocean, a market was moving because of choices he made at this exact hour. 31 miles away, in a glass office on the 41st floor, Clarissa Thorne stared at a screen full of falling numbers. She was 30 years old, and her chest felt tight. The air conditioning hummed too loud in the silent room. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago. Her family's company, Aegis Freight, was bleeding money every single hour. 3 shipping contracts had vanished this week alone, each one stolen by a rival bid nobody could explain. She knew exactly who was cutting the wound. His name was Trenton Pierce. She pressed her palms flat against the cold glass desk. Her reflection stared back at her from the darkened window, sharp-eyed and exhausted. Somewhere below, taxi horns blared faintly through thick glass. Clarissa's grandfather, Theodore Thorne, had built Aegis Freight from a single rusted tugboat. Now the company was dying, and nobody in the boardroom would say it out loud. Clarissa said it silently, every night, to her own reflection. At 3:40 that afternoon, a nurse called Clarissa to Presbyterian Hospital. The hallway smelled of bleach and old flowers wilting in a vase by the door. Theodore was coughing into a paper cup, his skin pale as old parchment. Machines beeped steadily beside his bed, a rhythm too slow for comfort. He grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. His fingers felt thin, but the grip still carried the weight of the man who built an empire. Aegis has 30 days left, he rasped. Maybe fewer. Clarissa's stomach dropped. We'll find more investors. We always do. Theodore shook his head slowly. There's one way. Marry a man named Darnell Cole. He works at the Newark port. Clarissa laughed, a short, disbelieving sound. Then she saw her grandfather's face. He wasn't joking. He's a stranger, she said. He fixes machines for a living. Marry him, Theodore said, or watch Trenton Pierce take everything your family built. Clarissa's throat closed. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall in front of him. She stormed out of the hospital room, her heels clicking hard against the tile floor. That night, Rain hammered the New Jersey Turnpike as Clarissa drove toward Newark. Wipers slapped hard against the windshield, barely keeping up. She needed to see this man herself. She needed to prove her grandfather wrong. She found Darnell under a flickering docklight, sleeves rolled up, grease smeared across his forearms. Rain hissed against the metal roof above him. Water dripped from the brim of his cap. He looked up, calm, unbothered by the storm around him. "You're the mechanic," she said. It wasn't a question. "I'm the mechanic," Darnell answered. "My grandfather wants me to marry you." Her voice cracked with disgust. "You're using a sick old man to climb into money you don't deserve." Darnell's jaw tightened, but his eyes stayed steady. A muscle flickered along his cheek, controlled, restrained. "I never asked for this," he said. "I don't want my daughter near people like you." Clarissa flinched. "People like me?" "People who look at a work jacket and see nothing else," Darnell said quietly. "You don't know anything about me," she snapped. "I know enough," he said. "I know you drove 40 minutes in a storm just to insult a stranger." That landed harder than she expected. Her cheeks burned, half from anger, half from something else she refused to name. She turned and walked back to her car without another word. Rainwater soaked through her blazer before she reached the door handle. Her hand shook on the steering wheel the entire drive home. She told herself it was only anger. Theodore Thorne died the next morning, quietly, in his sleep. The hospital called Clarissa at 6:09. She sat frozen on her kitchen floor, phone pressed to her ear, unable to speak. The tile felt cold beneath her legs, but she didn't move for a long time. The funeral came and went in a blur of black umbrellas and quiet condolences. Reporters asked questions about Aegis Freight's future before the flowers had even wilted. 3 days later, a family lawyer handed her a small wooden box. Inside sat an old pocket watch and a folded letter in her grandfather's handwriting. She read it standing in her office, her breath shallow, the paper trembling slightly between her fingers. "True wealth is not on the Upper East Side," the letter said. "Trust Darnell. He is the only shield strong enough to protect you both." Clarissa didn't understand. Not yet, but something in her chest loosened just slightly. She traced her thumb over the old watch's cracked glass face, wondering what secret it was hiding. Across the river, Darnell faced his own warning. His lawyer, a sharp, quiet man named Marcus, sat across from him at a diner booth. Steam rose from 2 cups of black coffee between them. Marcus slid a folder across the sticky table. "Someone is asking questions," Marcus said, "about a man they call the hidden financier. They're getting close to your real name." Darnell's stomach turned cold. He thought of Aaliyah's small hands, her laugh, her trust in him. "How close?" "Close enough," Marcus said, "that marrying Clarissa Thorne might be the safest move you make." "She hates me already," Darnell muttered. "Good," Marcus said. "Nobody looks twice at a marriage everyone already hates." Darnell rubbed his face. He hated hiding behind other people. But he hated the alternative even more. Somewhere out there, men were hunting for a name he had spent 9 years burying. 9 days later, at 9:15 in the morning, Clarissa and Darnell stood inside a small courthouse in Essex County. Fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. There were no flowers, no white dress. Clarissa wore a plain cream suit. Darnell wore a clean flannel shirt, pressed carefully the night before. A silver ring, costing $4,217.83, slid onto Clarissa's finger. His hand felt warm, calloused, steadier than she expected. Neither of them smiled. The clerk stamped the papers without looking up, already reaching for the next folder. "You may sign here," the clerk said flatly, sliding the pen forward. Clarissa signed her name in careful, controlled letters. Darnell signed his below hers, the pen scratching against thin courthouse paper. By that evening, Clarissa packed 2 suitcases and left her Manhattan penthouse behind. Doormen watched silently as she rolled her bags across the marble lobby for the last time. She moved into Darnell's cramped apartment near the port, where the smell of diesel drifted through the thin windows. The apartment was small, barely 4 rooms, with a radiator that clanked every few minutes. A single lamp buzzed in the corner, casting a dim yellow glow across worn carpet. Aaliyah watched her from the hallway, arms crossed, eyes narrow with suspicion. "Are you staying?" the girl asked. "For now," Clarissa said honestly. "My mom used to say that too," Aaliyah whispered, then walked away, her small footsteps quick against the hallway floor. Clarissa's chest ached in a way she didn't expect. She sat on the edge of a lumpy couch and wondered exactly what she had signed herself into. Outside, a ship's horn blared low across the water, deep and distant. The next morning, an older dock worker named Sal offered Clarissa a cup of burnt coffee from a dented thermos. His hands were rough, covered in calluses earned over 30 years at the port. "You're the CEO?" Sal said, studying her carefully. "Didn't expect you'd still be here." "Neither did I," Clarissa admitted, wrapping both hands around the warm cup. Sal chuckled, low and knowing. "Cole's a good man. Quiet but good. This port looks out for its own." Clarissa nodded slowly, surprised by the loyalty in his voice. Nobody spoke about Trenton Pierce that way, not even his own employees. Later, she watched Darnell help a younger worker fix a jammed conveyor belt, patient and unhurried despite the noise around them. He never raised his voice, even when metal screeched and sparks flew. The workers trusted him instinctively, in a way money couldn't buy. 2 weeks passed in tense, careful silence. Then Trenton Pierce invited them to a waterfront dinner, dressed in his sharpest suit, his shoes clicking like small gunshots on the floor. Candles flickered on white tablecloths, and violin music drifted faintly through the restaurant. Trenton circled their table slowly, swirling wine in his glass. His cologne arrived a full second. Before he did, thick and expensive, he dropped a crumpled dollar bill at Darnell's feet. "Buy yourself something nicer," Trenton sneered. "Or does your wife still pay for everything?" Laughter rippled from a nearby table of his friends. The room went quiet around them. Clarissa felt heat rush up her neck. Before she could stop herself, she stepped between them. "Watch your mouth," she said, her voice low and sharp. "He's my husband." Trenton blinked, clearly surprised. He hadn't expected her to defend the mechanic at all. His smile faltered for just a moment before snapping back into place. "How touching," he muttered, then walked away, his shoes still clicking against the polished floor. That night, walking home along the quiet street, Clarissa noticed something strange. Darnell hadn't raised his voice once. He hadn't needed to. His calm felt like armor, not weakness. She found herself glancing at him sideways, trying to understand what held him so still. "Doesn't it bother you?" she finally asked. "The way he talks to you?" Darnell shrugged, hands in his pockets. Men like that talk loud because they're scared of something quiet. Clarissa didn't answer right away. She simply walked beside him the rest of the way home, listening to their footsteps echo together on the empty sidewalk. Back home, Aaliyah struggled over a math worksheet at the kitchen table, her pencil snapping in frustration. She threw it down, with a huff, cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Clarissa sat beside her, patiently explaining fractions, with pizza slices drawn on a napkin. She kept her voice gentle, the same voice she once used to calm nervous shareholders. Slowly, the girl's shoulders relaxed. Her pencil moved steadier across the page, one careful number at a time. "You're not so bad," Aaliyah admitted, almost smiling. "You're not so bad yourself," Clarissa said, and meant it. Clarissa felt something warm bloom in her chest, unfamiliar and a little frightening. For the first time in months, the apartment didn't feel like a punishment at all. But Trenton Pierce wasn't finished. Losing face in public only made him more dangerous. He locked himself in his office. That night, tie loosened, whiskey untouched beside his keyboard. He began digging into Aegis Freight's finances, searching for whoever was quietly buying up its debt. What he found terrified him. Someone had already purchased 70% of Aegis's outstanding loans. Someone with unlimited resources and no name attached. His hands gripped the edge of his desk until his knuckles turned pale. He slammed his laptop shut, breathing hard through his nose. Losing the company slowly was one thing. Losing it to a ghost was something else entirely. He called his private investigator at midnight, voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Find out who's buying that debt," he snapped. "I don't care what it costs." The investigator promised answers within days, but days felt like an eternity to a man used to winning instantly. Trenton paced his office until sunrise, replaying every insult he had thrown at Darnell, searching for the moment he might have missed something important. Desperate to regain control, Trenton hired men from the docks, rough hands willing to do anything for cash. He met them in a dim parking garage, voice low, eyes darting toward every shadow. Concrete dust drifted under a flickering light bulb above their heads. His plan was simple and cruel. Kidnap the mechanic's daughter during the next port event. Force Clarissa to sign away her company. "No one gets hurt," Trenton insisted, though his voice wavered slightly. "Just scare them. Just enough to make her sign." One of the men grunted, counting a thick stack of cash before pocketing it without another word. Darnell caught a fragment of the plot through his hidden network, but the details stayed frustratingly unclear. Encrypted messages arrived in broken pieces, half-translated, missing dates. He didn't know when. He didn't know exactly how. He lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, listening to Aaliyah's soft breathing through the wall. Fear coiled tight around his ribs, silent and merciless. He pressed his palm flat against his chest, trying to slow his own racing heartbeat. The following Friday, Trenton hosted another waterfront event, this time larger, louder, filled with cameras and champagne. String lights hung between the cranes, glowing warm against the darkening sky. Clarissa wore a deep blue dress. Darnell wore the same steady, watchful expression he always did. Aaliyah sat quietly near the food tables, swinging her legs, waiting for her father to finish shaking hands with strangers. She clutched a small paper plate of crackers, humming softly to herself. At exactly 8:33, a fuel shed near the docks exploded into flame. The blast rattled glasses off nearby tables. Thick black smoke rolled across the party like a living thing, swallowing the string lights whole. Screams tore through the crowd instantly. People shoved past each other, running blindly toward the exits, heels snapping on wet pavement. Clarissa was already near the VIP walkway, close enough to escape without a scratch. Then she heard it, a child scream, muffled, terrified, coming from inside the burning port office. Aaliyah. Her whole body went cold, faster than the smoke could reach her. Clarissa didn't think. She ripped off her expensive coat and soaked it in water from a broken hose. The fabric hissed against her skin, cold and heavy. She ran straight into the smoke, her eyes burning, her lungs screaming for air. She found Aaliyah crouched under a desk, coughing violently, tears streaking her soot-covered face. "It's okay," Clarissa gasped. "I've got you." Clarissa wrapped the wet coat around them both and pulled the girl close, feeling the child's small heartbeat hammering against her own chest. They crawled together across the floor, beneath the worst of the smoke. Heat pressed down on them like a heavy hand. A burning beam cracked overhead, splitting with a sharp, violent sound. It crashed down, striking Clarissa's shoulder hard enough to make her cry out. Pain seared through her arm, hot and blinding, but she didn't stop moving. She pushed Aaliyah toward the door first, always first, no matter what it cost her. Outside, Darnell caught them both as they stumbled into clean air, coughing, gasping, alive. His hands trembled as he checked his daughter's face, then Clarissa's burned shoulder. His throat tightened, and for once no words came out at all. He had expected Clarissa to run. He had expected privilege to choose itself over risk. Instead, she chose his daughter, without hesitation, without a single moment of doubt. Something inside him, guarded for 9 long years, cracked wide open. At Essex County Hospital, Clarissa woke up slowly, the sharp smell of antiseptic filling her nose. Her shoulder was wrapped in white bandages, tight and throbbing. A machine beeped steadily beside her bed, tracking her heartbeat. Aaliyah climbed onto the bed beside her, careful not to bump her shoulder, wrapping small arms around her neck instead. "Mom," Aaliyah whispered, then froze, as if the word had slipped out by accident. Clarissa's eyes filled with tears. She didn't correct her. She simply held the girl tighter, her heart pounding against her bruised ribs. The hospital room felt warmer than any penthouse she had ever owned. Machines beeped softly around them, but for once, the sound felt gentle instead of frightening. Darnell sat quietly by the window, watching them both, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. Something inside him had shifted permanently, like a lock finally turning open. He stepped into the hallway and dialed a number he hadn't used in months. "Marcus," he said, his voice suddenly cold and precise. "It's time to finish this. Buy the rest of the Aegis debt. Freeze every account Trenton Pierce controls." Marcus paused on the line. "You're sure? Once we move, there's no quiet way back." "I've never been more sure," Darnell said. "He almost killed my daughter. He doesn't get to keep hiding behind money." Marcus exhaled slowly. "Understood. I'll have everything ready before the meeting tomorrow." Darnell hung up and stood alone in the hallway for a moment, listening to the hospital's quiet hum around him. 9 years of caution were finally about to end. That night, Marcus arrived at the hospital with a thick leather bag under one arm. He and Darnell sat in a small waiting room, voices barely above a whisper. "The margin call is ready," Marcus said. "The moment you say the word, Trenton's accounts freeze completely." "Do it quietly," Darnell said. "I don't want him warned before morning." Marcus nodded, already dialing a number on his phone. Outside the window, Newark's skyline blinked steadily against the dark sky, unaware of what was coming. Darnell watched the city lights for a long moment. 9 years of hiding were about to end in a single boardroom under a single sunrise. Meanwhile, Trenton Pierce believed the fire had destroyed Aegis Freight completely. Records burned, shipments delayed, insurance adjusters swarmed the docks, clipboards in hand, cameras flashing at charred metal. A crushing debt payment was due the very next morning, and he was certain Clarissa couldn't pay it. He poured himself a drink that night, smiling into the glass. Finally, he thought, the mechanic and his fake wife would disappear from his city for good. He called an emergency shareholder meeting for 9 o'clock sharp in Manhattan. He planned to strip Clarissa of her title publicly and expose her marriage as a desperate, embarrassing scheme. "Wear your best dress tomorrow," Darnell told her quietly that night, his hand resting gently over her bandaged shoulder. "No one will hurt you again." Clarissa searched his face, unsure whether to believe a man who fixed generators for a living. But something in his eyes felt unshakable, almost dangerous in its calm. She nodded slowly, deciding for once to simply trust him. The next morning, Aegis Freight's boardroom filled with reporters, shareholders, and Trenton Pierce's smug, practiced smile. Camera flashes popped near the back wall. He straightened his tie and cleared his throat, savoring the moment like a fine meal. Effective immediately, Trenton announced, Clarissa Thorne is removed as CEO due to gross financial mismanagement and a fraudulent, humiliating marriage. Whispers rippled through the crowd. A few shareholders exchanged smug glances of their own. Clarissa stood perfectly still, her spine straight, her face unreadable. Beside her, Darnell wore his old work jacket, hands calmly folded in front of him. "Get him out of here," Trenton snapped, pointing at Darnell. "This isn't a place for dock workers." Security guards near the door shifted their weight, unsure, waiting for a signal. Clarissa's heart pounded, but she kept her chin level, refusing to give Trenton the reaction he wanted. She glanced at Darnell, and something in his calm expression steadied her completely. "You won't touch him," she said quietly, loud enough for the front row to hear. Trenton laughed, short and dismissive. "This isn't your call to make anymore, Clarissa." The heavy wooden doors swung open before security could move. Marcus walked in first, followed by a line of sharp-suited lawyers carrying thick folders under their arms. The room fell into stunned silence. Papers hit the polished table with a heavy, final thud. Every eye in the room turned toward the doorway. Somewhere, a phone buzzed unanswered on the table. Darnell slowly unzipped his worn work jacket and let it fall from his shoulders. It landed on the floor with a soft, deliberate sound. Underneath, a perfectly tailored charcoal suit caught the morning light. "My name," he said, his voice quiet but unshaking, "is Darnell Blackwood." Gasps rippled through the crowd. A shareholder near the front dropped her pen. Trenton's smile cracked, then collapsed entirely, color draining from his face like water from a broken glass. "I control Blackwood's sovereign fund," Darnell continued. "I hold 70% of Aegis's debt. As of 9:41 this morning, I hold all of it." Trenton's mouth opened, but no sound came out. His hands trembled violently at his sides, his expensive watch suddenly looking small and meaningless. "You also tried to burn a Newark port office," Darnell said, his voice sharpening, "with my daughter trapped inside it." Security officers moved forward, but this time they weren't protecting Trenton. Two police detectives stepped through the door behind them, badges raised high, their footsteps echoing across the marble floor. "You're under arrest," one detective said, "for arson and attempted kidnapping." Handcuffs clicked shut around Trenton's wrists, cold metal against trembling skin. He sputtered protests that nobody in the room bothered to hear anymore. His empire, built on cruelty, crumbled in less than 60 seconds. Reporters scrambled to type on their phones, capturing every second of his collapse. The same cameras that once flattered him now framed his downfall. Clarissa stared at her husband, chest rising and falling rapidly, disbelief written across every feature. The mechanic from Newark controlled more money than she had ever imagined possible. Darnell turned to face her directly, ignoring the chaos still swirling around them. "I never lied about loving my daughter," he said softly. "Everything else, I hid to protect her." Later that afternoon, in a quiet office overlooking the Hudson River, sunlight spilled gently across the wooden floor. Darnell placed a folder on the desk between them. Every dollar of Aegis Freight's debt had been erased completely. Clarissa flipped through the pages slowly, her hands still trembling slightly from the morning's chaos. Numbers that once haunted her sleep now read 0, line after line. He also handed her a small velvet box. Inside sat a diamond ring, simple, elegant, nothing like the silver band from the courthouse. "I should have told you everything sooner," Darnell admitted, his voice low. "I was scared of losing what mattered most." Clarissa reached out and took his hand, ignoring the ache in her bandaged shoulder entirely. "You didn't lie about who you are," she said. "Not the part that counts." "Which part is that?" he asked softly. "The part that ran into a burning building for people he loves," she said. "The part that fixed generators every night so his daughter could sleep safe. That part never lied to me once." Darnell's throat tightened, and he simply nodded, unable to trust his own voice just yet. Aaliyah burst into the room a moment later, breathless and grinning, from ear to ear, a juice box still clutched in one hand. She wrapped her arms around both of them at once, refusing to let go. That evening, the three of them walked slowly along the Newark waterfront, where the whole story had nearly ended in flames. The setting sun painted the water a soft, burning orange. Gulls circled lazily overhead, calling to each other across the quiet air. Diesel and salt still hung faintly in the air, familiar now instead of foreign. Darnell squeezed Clarissa's hand gently, as Aaliyah skipped ahead of them along the dock, chasing a stray seagull with a burst of laughter. "Careful," Clarissa called, after her, smiling despite the ache still lingering in her shoulder. Aaliyah laughed and waved back, without slowing down at all. Darnell glanced sideways at her, his expression softer than she had ever seen it. "Any regrets?" he asked quietly. Clarissa thought about the penthouse she left behind, the boardroom battles, the silver ring that once felt like a punishment. None of it weighed the same anymore. "Not one," she said honestly. Clarissa realized, watching her husband's quiet, unshaken face. That real wealth had never been about money at all. It had always been about who chose to stay when everything caught fire. Somewhere behind them, a ship's horn sounded low and steady, drifting out across the dark water toward the open sea. Aaliyah ran back and grabbed both their hands, pulling them forward into the last light of the evening. For the first time in years, Darnell felt no need to hide anything at all. The port that once hid his secret now simply felt like home.